Don't worry, 3 minutes from me. Like so many of you, I read George Weigel's magnificent biography of John Paul II and was deeply moved by it. My favorite section of that biography is the section dealing with the young manhood of Karol Wojtyła. Karol Wojtyła went to the Jagiellonian University in September of 1939. Of course, the very same moment that the Nazis arrived in Poland. Very quickly, Polish society was incapacitated. It was decapitated. Many of the professors of Karol Wojtyła were killed outright or sent to camps. What did he do? During that terrible time, he went underground. With a few friends in the rhapsodic theater, he would gather behind closed and locked doors, with the shades drawn, reading texts of Polish literature, often by flashlight. Many who were on their way to those meetings or home from them were arrested, some killed by the Germans. What was he doing? He and his friends, they were preserving more than Polish literature. Because ingredient in that literature were all the ideas George Weigel was just speaking of. Ingredient in that great literature was the Catholic imagination. And during those terrible years, Karol Wojtyła hunkered down with his friends, and he preserved it. 1945, the Nazis are expelled. They're replaced by perhaps a slightly less oppressive communist presence. During those terrible years, what did Karol Wojtyła do? He hunkered down with many of his young friends, colleagues, whom he trained in Catholic spirituality, in Catholic literature, in Catholic theology, in the formation of a Catholic mentality and culture. And then, of course, as we know, through God's amazing grace, that beleaguered young man became the Pope. And at the propitious moment, at a very dark time in Polish history again, he returned. And this time, with the full power of the papacy behind him, he unleashed the life that he had preserved during those terrible years. He unleashed these young people whom he had formed and who were now leaders in society, editors and teachers and business leaders. And with that full force of his authority, he sent them out. And as we know, it transfigured Polish society, it transfigured the world. The biblical image that comes to mind is Noah's Ark. During that terrible time, when human sin had overwhelmed the human project, God preserves Noah and his family and a remnant of his creation on the ark, carefully preserving a microcosm of what God desires. But that life was not meant to hunker down behind the walls of the ark. At the propitious moment, when the waters had receded, Noah opened the windows, he opened the doors, and he let that life out. That's precisely what Karol Wojtyła did. That's precisely the dual call of the church, it seems to me. The culture will always be, to a greater or lesser extent, hostile to our project. And therefore we will always be called upon, to some degree, to hunker down and to preserve a form of life. Where does it happen for us? Above all, in the liturgy, the source and summit of the Christian life. May I say that the fact that 70 to 75% of our brothers and sisters stay away from the source and summit of the Christian life on a regular basis is a tragedy. If you had told Henri de Lubac or Jean Danielou or Hans Urs von Balthasar, the great fathers of Vatican II, if you had told them in 2008, 75% of American Catholics would be staying away from the liturgy, they would have felt the project had failed. They wanted to revive the liturgy, this place where the Catholic form of life is on display and cultivated. Where else does it happen? It happens in our great intellectual life. Chrysostom, Jerome, Augustine, Thomas Aquinas, Anselm, Bonaventure, Dante, John Henry Newman, G.K. Chesterton, John Paul II, Teresa of Avila, the Little Flower. We have this very rich intellectual and cultural tradition. We must preserve it. We must love it. We must pass it on to our children. When I was 13 years old, 1973, at the height of a lot of the post-conciliar confusion in Catholic schools and education, I sat in a classroom at Fenwick High School and heard one of the Dominican friars teach us the 5 arguments of Thomas Aquinas for God's existence. It changed my life. It set me on a path I've never gotten off of. When we preserve our great intellectual tradition and pass it on to our kids, we keep this Catholic thing going. Now, that's the moment of preservation. But the second great moment of the Church's life, exemplified in John Paul II, is we must find in prudence those propitious moments when we let that life out. And that's the Vatican II vision. That's the Vatican II vision of the role of the laity. Yes, to be great Catholic lawyers, not incidentally Catholic. To be great Catholic politicians, not incidentally so. To be great Catholic teachers and writers. To be great Catholic journalists and actors. That's how we transfigure the world, by spreading the seeds that we've carefully preserved. There's the work of the new evangelization. That we might let loose this life, this dunamis, Paul called it, this power of the gospel for the transformation of the world. That is the properly subversive role of the great evangelization. Peace and God bless.